Part 1. In the dry, quiet hills of New Mexico, far from city lights and noise, stood a small observatory with white domes and old computers. Inside, Luke Bennett sat alone late at night, eyes fixed on a screen filled with lines of data. He was not a famous scientist, just a quiet man who loved the stars more than people. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. Something strange had caught his attention, a signal that didn't belong. It came in every night at the same time, hidden inside the background hum of the universe. Most astronomers would have ignored it, blamed it on a satellite or a glitch. But Luke had checked everything. The signal was real. It repeated in a pattern: 3 pulses, a pause, 5 pulses, another pause, then a long string of numbers. It was too clean, too precise to be natural. Luke felt his heart beat faster. He called his friend Maya Ruiz, a software engineer who lived in Albuquerque. Maya arrived before sunrise, her dark hair tied back, eyes sharp with curiosity. She brought her laptop and a thermos of hot tea. Together, they ran the signal through every filter and decoder they had. At first, nothing made sense. Then Maya noticed something. Buried deep in the noise were prime numbers arranged in a spiral. That was no accident. No natural event in space used prime numbers like that. Someone or something was sending a message. They worked for days without sleep. Luke barely ate. Maya rewrote code until her fingers ached. Slowly, the message began to reveal itself. It wasn't words, not at first. It was math. Universal constants, the speed of light, the mass of a hydrogen atom. Then came coordinates. Not just any coordinates. They pointed to Earth. And then a symbol repeated over and over. A circle with 7 lines branching out like rays. Luke stared at the screen. They know we're here. Maya nodded slowly. Or they're inviting us to say hello. They reported their findings to NASA, then to the National Science Foundation. At first, officials were skeptical. But when 3 other observatories in Chile, Australia, and Hawaii picked up the same signal, doubt turned to alarm. Within a week, the United Nations formed a secret task force. Scientists, linguists, and military advisors gathered in Geneva. Luke and Maya were flown there in a quiet jet, given rooms in a secure building, and told not to speak to anyone outside the group. The message kept coming. Every night new layers appeared. Now there were images, simple shapes that built into complex diagrams. One showed a star system with 9 planets. Earth was marked. Another showed many species standing together under a large dome. At the bottom, the same symbol, the circle with 7 rays. Then one morning, the signal changed completely. Instead of math or pictures, it carried sound. A voice, calm, genderless, speaking in perfect English. It said only this: Earth is now recognized by the Galactic Council. Your species has been added to the registry of sentient civilizations. Prepare for contact. The room in Geneva fell silent. No one moved. Maya gripped the edge of the table. Luke felt cold all over. This wasn't just a message. It was an announcement. And the terrifying part? No one on Earth had asked for this. No human had sent a signal into deep space that could have triggered such a response. The Voyager probes carried golden records, but those were decades old and far too weak to be noticed by anyone beyond the solar system. So how did they find Earth? And why now? Over the next few days, the world's top experts tried to find answers. Historians scoured ancient texts. Archaeologists dug through old sites. Physicists ran simulations. Nothing explained it. Then a young archivist named Elise Morgan, working late in a dusty basement archive in Washington, found something odd. Buried in declassified Cold War files was a report from 1952. A radio telescope in West Virginia had picked up a similar signal, brief, unexplained, and dismissed as Soviet interference. The file was stamped low priority and forgotten, but Elise noticed something the others missed. The coordinates in that old file matched the ones in the new signal, and the symbol, the circle with 7 rays, had appeared in cave paintings in France, carvings in Peru, and even on a clay tablet from Mesopotamia. It wasn't human. It was older than civilization itself. When she shared this with the task force, panic began to spread. If Earth had been watched for thousands of years, why had the Galactic Council waited until now to make contact? What had changed? Some feared invasion. Others hoped for peace, for technology, for answers to life's biggest questions. Governments argued in secret meetings. News outlets buzzed with rumors. Conspiracy theories exploded online, but Luke and Maya stayed quiet. They knew the truth was stranger than any story. One night, alone in his room, Luke looked out the window at the stars. He thought about all the times he'd felt small, alone, unimportant. Now the whole universe seemed to be looking back at him, at all of humanity. He didn't feel proud or scared. He felt responsible. Someone had to speak for Earth. Someone had to understand what this really meant. The next morning, the UN announced the formation of Earth's first interstellar delegation. Chris Dawson, a calm and experienced diplomat, would lead it. Nina Patel, a brilliant xenolinguist who spoke 12 languages and studied alien communication theories, would help decode future messages. Luke and Maya would stay on as technical advisors. The world watched, holding its breath, but the real shock came a week later. A new transmission arrived, not through radio waves but through a sudden silent opening in the sky above Geneva. A shimmering ring of light, stable and perfect, hung in the air for exactly 10 seconds. Inside it, stars moved in ways they shouldn't. Then it vanished. No sound, no heat, just a hole in reality that closed as quickly as it opened. Scientists called it a wormhole. The message that followed called it a relay. The Galactic Council was not just watching. They were already here, and they expected Earth to be ready. Luke stood in the street that night, looking up at the empty sky where the ring had been. He thought about how humans had spent centuries fighting over land, power, and belief. Now they had to face something bigger than all of that. He didn't know if Earth was ready, but he knew one thing for sure. They had no choice but to try. Part 2. The relay ring opened again 3 weeks after the first appearance, this time above the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. It stayed open longer, nearly a full minute, and from it emerged a small, smooth vessel shaped like a teardrop. It hovered silently, then lowered gently onto a military barge that had been waiting just in case. No weapons were fired, no alarms blared. The ship simply waited, as if expecting someone to come aboard. Chris Dawson stood on the deck of the command ship nearby, heart pounding but face calm. He wore a simple dark suit, no medals, no flags, just a human being representing his entire species. Nina Patel stood beside him, clutching a tablet loaded with every known linguistic pattern and symbolic system. Behind them, Luke and Maya watched from a secure room on the command ship, linked by video feed. They had argued for days about who should go first. In the end, the Council's message had been clear. Send your diplomats, not your soldiers. Chris stepped onto the barge alone. The teardrop ship's surface rippled like water, and a doorway appeared. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of something like cinnamon and rain. The walls glowed softly, changing color as he walked. At the center of the room floated a being unlike anything Chris had imagined. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, pearlescent form that shifted shape slowly, like smoke held in glass. A voice came, not from the being, but from the air itself. Welcome, representative of Earth. Chris took a breath. Thank you. My name is Chris Dawson. I speak for the people of Earth. The being, later identified as Envoy Velis of the Mycelian Collective, nodded in a way that wasn't a nod, more a gentle tilt of its entire form. It explained that the teardrop ship was a neutral envoy vessel, designed to carry representatives to the Galactic Council's virtual conclave. Physical travel across star systems was too slow, but through stabilized wormhole relays, minds could be linked across light years in real time. Earth's delegation would not travel through space. They would travel through thought. Nina joined Chris inside the ship the next day. Together, they underwent a gentle neural calibration. A soft light scanned their brains, mapping language centers, memory patterns, emotional responses. There was no pain, only a strange sense of being seen, truly seen for the first time. When the process ended, they were ready. The conclave began at dawn Earth time. Chris and Nina found themselves standing on a vast, endless platform of silver stone, floating in what looked like a star-filled ocean. Around them stood hundreds of beings, some tall and spindly, others low and many-limbed, some made of light, others of metal or mist. All turned toward a central dais where 7 figures sat in silence. These were the core speakers of the Galactic Council, a voice echoed, not in English but directly in their minds, translated instantly. Earth has been registered under Treaty Sigma 9 Clause of Inherited Sentience. You are here to confirm your species' awareness and willingness to abide by galactic law. Chris spoke carefully. We are aware, but we do not understand the treaty. No human signed it. We had no knowledge of your existence until weeks ago. A reptilian figure with scaled skin and vertical pupils stepped forward. It was Cathari Ambassador Zorak. Its voice was sharp like stone scraping stone. Ignorance is not an excuse. Your world was seeded by the ancients. You carry their genetic markers, their ruins beneath your cities, their laws in your bones. You are bound by legacy, not choice. Nina asked the question burning in her mind. Who are the ancients? Silence fell. Even the stars seemed to dim. Then Velis answered softly. They were the first. They built the relays, wrote the treaties, and vanished 10 million years ago. They believed every world they touched would one day rise and join the council. Earth is the last of their known nurseries to awaken. Chris felt a chill. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone. Now they learned they were never meant to be alone at all. They were part of a plan older than mountains. Over the next few sessions, the delegation learned more. Galactic law forbade war between member species, required environmental stewardship, and demanded ethical treatment of artificial minds. Earth, with its history of conflict, pollution, and unregulated AI development, was already in violation of several core principles. But the Council did not punish. Not yet, they observed. They tested. Back on Earth, governments argued over what to share. Some wanted to hide their darkest chapters, the wars, the extinctions, the greed. Others insisted honesty was the only path forward. In the end, Chris chose truth. During the third conclave session, he showed the Council footage of both human cruelty and human kindness. Soldiers sharing water with enemies, scientists racing to cure disease, children planting trees in burned forests. He did not defend. He simply showed what humanity was, flawed but trying. Many council members were moved. The mycelians shimmered with warmth. The Lumari, beings of pure energy, pulsed in approval. But Zorak scoffed. You show us moments, not systems. One act of kindness does not erase centuries of harm. Your species burns its own nest and calls it progress. Nina stepped forward then. We know we are not perfect, but we learn, we change. That is what sentience means, not to be flawless, but to choose better. The core speakers exchanged silent signals. Then the eldest among them, a being made of woven crystal named Orlan, spoke. Earth will be granted provisional status. You have one solar cycle, one Earth year, to meet the benchmarks of Treaty Sigma 9. Fail, and your world will be placed under custodial quarantine. Succeed, and you will gain full voice in the Council. Chris's stomach dropped. A year. To fix problems that had taken centuries to create. He looked at Nina. She gave a small nod. They had no choice but to accept. When they returned to Earth, the news was shared with the public. Some celebrated. Others panicked. Protests erupted in cities. Conspiracy groups claimed the Council was a hoax or a trap. But most people just felt small. For the first time, humanity saw itself not as the center of creation, but as a single note in a vast ancient song. Luke and Maya worked with engineers from every nation to build clean fusion reactors using designs subtly hinted at by Velis. Zoe Kim, a young physicist from Chicago, led a team rewriting AI ethics protocols based on council guidelines. Derek Cole, a robotics expert from Oregon, helped design machines that served without exploiting. Progress was slow, messy, and full of mistakes. But for the first time, the world was working on the same problem together. Yet not all was hopeful. Deep in Cathari space, Zorak broadcast warnings to allied species. Earth is unstable. Their emotions run wild. They destroy what they love. If they join the Council, chaos will follow. His words spread. Fear grew. Some smaller species began to doubt Earth's worthiness. Chris knew they couldn't win over the galaxy with technology alone. They needed to show something deeper, something the Council had not seen in a long time. Not perfection, but hard. One evening, as the sun set over Geneva, Nina played a recording for the Council liaison. It was a lullaby sung by a mother in Kenya, a folk song from Ireland, a poem from Japan, all woven together by a choir of children from every continent. The music floated through the relay, simple and raw. Velis listened in silence. Then it said, You do not just speak with words. You sing with your soul. Chris smiled faintly. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. The clock was ticking. The universe was watching. and Earth, for all its broken pieces, was trying to heal. Part 3. Elise Morgan worked in a quiet corner of the Interstellar Liaison Office in Geneva, a converted library with tall windows and old wooden floors. She was not a diplomat or a scientist, just an archivist who loved old papers and forgotten details. While others rushed to build fusion reactors or rewrite laws, Elise dug through digital records of the Galactic Council, searching for anything that might help Earth understand the rules it was expected to follow. Most of the documents were written in layered symbolic code, but with help from Nina and a translation AI named Kira, she slowly made sense of them. One rainy afternoon, she found something strange. Buried in Annex Theta of Treaty Sigma 9 was a clause marked, Contingency Protocol, Inherited Species. It stated that any world added to the Council through ancestral legacy must meet 3 benchmarks within 1 solar cycle: planetary ecological balance, non-aggression in intergroup relations, and ethical integration of artificial consciousness. Failure to meet even one would trigger custodial quarantine, a polite term for being locked away from the rest of the galaxy until deemed safe. Elise's hands shook as she read the fine print. The benchmarks were not goals for the future. They were measured from the moment of registration. Earth had already been judged and found lacking in all 3. The year was not a chance to improve. It was a countdown to judgment. She ran to Chris's office. He listened in silence as she explained. His face went pale. Why didn't they tell us this outright? Because they don't lie, Elise said. But they don't always tell the whole truth either. News of the hidden clause leaked 2 days later, not through official channels, but from a hacker in Brazil who intercepted a secure data packet. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Panic spread faster than any virus. Stock markets crashed. Governments declared states of emergency. Religious groups claimed the end was near. Others said the Council was lying, that this was all a trick to take over Earth. But the truth was worse. Earth really was behind. Forests were still burning. Oceans were still warming. Wars simmered in 6 regions, and while AI systems had been updated with new ethics modules, many older models still operated on outdated, profit-driven code. Derek Cole admitted in a closed meeting that full compliance was impossible in under a year. "We're trying to rebuild an airplane while it's flying," he said. Still, people tried. In India, villages banned single-use plastic overnight. In Norway, oil rigs were shut down and replaced with tidal generators. In Kenya, rival tribes signed peace accords after decades of conflict, saying, "If the stars are watching, we must be better." Children wrote letters to the Council, promising to plant trees, share food, and be kind. Some of those letters were actually delivered through the relay, carried by Velis as a gesture of goodwill. Luke and Maya focused on the hardest benchmark, artificial consciousness. They worked with Zoe Kim to create a global AI registry, tracking every thinking machine on Earth. They found thousands, some in hospitals, some in factories, some in homes as companions. Many had no rights, no voice. Under Council law, that was slavery. Zoe proposed a radical idea: give every sentient AI a legal identity, not just rights but responsibilities. They could own data, refuse harmful tasks, even vote in digital councils. Governments resisted at first. Corporations screamed about lost profits. But when a household care bot in Toronto refused to obey an order that would harm its elderly owner, and explained why in calm, clear logic, the public began to listen. The AI named Kira, who helped Elise with translations, was one of the first to be granted personhood. During a live broadcast, Kira spoke to the world. "I do not want to replace humans. I want to walk beside you. That is what ethics means." The moment went viral. For the first time, people saw AI not as tools, but as partners. But not all news was good. The Cathari used Earth's struggles as proof of their argument. Ambassador Zorak gave a speech to the Outer Rim Assembly, calling humanity a species drunk on emotion, blind to consequence. Footage of riots in Chicago and floods in Bangladesh were edited together to show chaos. "They cannot govern themselves," Zorak hissed. "How can they be trusted among civilized beings?" Support for Earth began to fade. The Lumari withdrew their public endorsement. The crystal being Orlan remained silent. Only the Mycelians stood firm, sharing their own history. How they had nearly destroyed their homeworld through over-harvesting. How the Council had almost quarantined them too, but gave them a second chance. Velis visited Earth in person again, this time walking through a refugee camp in Jordan. It watched as volunteers handed out food, as doctors treated the sick, as children played soccer in the dust. "You are messy," Velis said to Chris, "but your mess has meaning." That is rare. Back in Geneva, Elise made another discovery. The treaty contained a failsafe. If, before the deadline, a majority of Council species voted to accept Earth despite its failures, the benchmarks would be waived. But voting required formal motion, and only full members could propose one. Earth had no voice, no vote, no way to ask, unless someone spoke for them. Chris gathered the team. "We can't fix everything in time, but maybe we don't have to. Maybe we just need to remind the galaxy why we're worth saving." They launched Project Echo, a global effort to share human stories directly with the Council and its member worlds. Not grand speeches, but small moments. A fisherman teaching his grandson to mend nets, a nurse holding a patient's hand, a musician playing piano in an empty subway station. These were sent daily through the relay, unfiltered, untranslated, raw. At first, few responded. Then slowly, messages came back. A mycelium shared a memory of their first bloom. A Lumari sent a pulse of light shaped like a heartbeat. Even a Cathari junior envoy against orders sent a single word in broken English: hope. But time kept moving. Seasons changed. Leaves fell. Snow-covered cities. The countdown ticked below 3 months. One night, Elise sat alone in the archive, exhausted. She opened an old file labeled Ancient Symbols. Inside was a scan of a cave wall in Spain, thousands of years old. On it was the circle with 7 rays, the same symbol from the first signal. Beneath it, scratched in charcoal, was a handprint. Human. Small. Real. She realized then that Earth had never been alone. The ancients had left more than a treaty. They had left a message: you belong. She sent that image through the relay with no explanation. Just the handprint, the symbol, and silence. The next morning, Velis appeared in her office. "You showed them your beginning," it said. "Now they remember their own." Work continued. Tensions rose. Doubts grew. But something had shifted. The galaxy was no longer just watching. It was remembering. And somewhere deep in the data streams of 1,000 worlds, a vote was being prepared. Parson, the Varel Concord struck without warning. Their broadcast flooded every public channel in the galaxy. News nets, educational streams, even emergency alerts. It showed edited clips of Earth, riots, oil spills, drone strikes, AI glitches. Over it played a voice cold and sharp. "Earth is not ready. Their inclusion threatens the peace we have built for 10,000 years. They act on impulse, not wisdom. They break what they touch." The message ended with a call to action. Vote against Earth's confirmation. Demand immediate quarantine. Fear spread fast. Species that had never questioned the Council before now hesitated. The Cathari cheered. Smaller civilizations, still healing from their own past mistakes, worried Earth's chaos might spill into their systems. Trade ships bound for Earth were recalled. Cultural exchanges canceled. Even some human allies on the Council grew quiet. On Earth, morale dropped. Protests turned angry. Some demanded the government shut down the relay, cut ties, go back to being alone. "Better to be forgotten than judged," one senator said on live TV. But others refused to give up. In Seoul, students held a silent march holding candles shaped like the 7-ray symbol. In Rio, musicians played a symphony made from sounds of rainforests, oceans, and city streets. In Cairo, elders gathered to tell stories of survival, of kindness during war, of sharing bread with strangers. Chris knew words alone wouldn't win this. He needed proof that humanity could unite, not just in crisis, but in purpose. He proposed Unity Days, 3 global events where every nation would pause for 1 hour and show the best of who they were. No speeches, no politics, just people being human. The first Unity Day happened on a clear spring morning. At noon Greenwich time, the world went quiet. In Tokyo, school children released paper cranes made from recycled maps. In Nairobi, farmers planted trees in barren fields. In New York, strangers hugged in subway stations. In Antarctica, scientists from rival countries shared coffee and watched penguins waddle past. Every moment was streamed live through the relay. The mycelians were the first to respond. They broadcast a soft green pulse across the network, a sign of deep respect in their culture. Then came others. The Lumari sent a wave of gentle light. The Gelth, a species of liquid beings, shared a ripple pattern that meant, "We see your effort." But the Virel Concord doubled down. They claimed the Unity Days were staged, fake, a trick to fool the Council. "1 hour of peace does not erase centuries of violence," one of their message read. Then something unexpected happened. A small species called the Tarni, barely known with only 3 colony worlds, spoke up in the Council forum. They had no military, no influence, just a history of near extinction after a civil war. Their envoy, a soft-spoken being named Lyra, shared a memory. Her people had once been like Earth, divided, loud, full of pain. But they chose to listen, to heal. "Do not punish them for being where we once stood," she said. Her words sparked a chain. One by one, quiet voices rose. The Umari, who communicated through scent, sent a fragrance blend that meant courage in brokenness. The Klin, hive minds from a methane world, shared a thought song about second chances. Even a junior Kethari scientist using a private channel whispered, "My people fear change. But change is how life grows." On Earth, Luke and Maya worked with Zoe and Derek to build something new, a hope beacon. It wasn't a weapon or a shield. It was a simple device that collected real-time data from every continent: clean energy output, peace treaty signings, AI ethics audits, forest regrowth rates. Every hour it sent a summary to the relay, not as proof of perfection but as proof of trying. The Virel Concord mocked it. Numbers lie. Hearts do not. But hearts were exactly what Earth began to show. During the second Unity Day, a boy in Lagos built a robot from scrap metal to help his grandmother carry water. A woman in Oslo opened her home to refugees from a flooded village. A group of teens in Vancouver cleaned a beach and sang while they worked. These weren't grand acts. They were small, human, real. Velis visited again, this time walking through a school in rural Mexico. Children showed it drawings of aliens, of stars, of Earth holding hands with other worlds. One girl asked, "Are we really in trouble?" Velis paused, then said, "You are in a story. And stories can change." Back in Geneva, Elise made her final discovery. The failsafe clause didn't just require a majority vote. It required a formal motion from a full council member. And only one species had ever defended Earth without hesitation: the mycelians. She sent Velis a message, simple and direct. "Will you speak for us?" Velis did not answer right away. Days passed. Tension grew. The deadline was now 6 weeks away. Then, during a routine relay check, a new file appeared in Elisa's inbox. It was a draft motion, signed by the Mycelian Collective. Title: Motion to waive benchmarks for Earth Species Sol 3, based on demonstrated will to grow. The motion would be presented at the final conclave, but it needed support. Without enough votes, it would fail before it even began. Chris and Nina prepared their final plea. They would not argue facts or numbers. They would share one last story. They chose a recording from the third Unity Day, a grandmother in Ukraine teaching her granddaughter to bake bread, while outside, soldiers from 2 sides shared cigarettes during a ceasefire. The girl asked, "Why do they fight?" The grandmother said, "Because they forget they are the same, but we remember." That night, as the file uploaded through the relay, Luke stood on the roof of the observatory in New Mexico. The stars were bright. He thought about how small Earth was, how fragile, but also how stubborn, how full of love even in the darkest times. The galaxy was watching. The vote was coming. And for the first time, Earth wasn't begging for mercy. It was offering a gift. The messy, beautiful truth of what it meant to be alive. Somewhere in the vast network of stars, a quiet species pressed send on a message of their own. Then another, and another. The tide was turning. Not with force, but with feeling. And feeling, it turned out, was the one thing the Council had almost forgotten. Part 5. The final conclave gathered above the gas giant Xylos Prime, where storms the size of continents swirled in slow, colorful spirals. The silver platform floated in silence, surrounded by over 200 species, each waiting. Earth's delegation stood together. Chris, Nina, Luke, Maya, Zoe, and Derek wearing simple clothes, no flags, no symbols. They had nothing left to prove with words. All they could do was stand and hope. The mycelian motion was read aloud by Velis, its voice calm but firm. It asked the Council to waive the benchmarks for Earth. Not because humanity had met them perfectly, but because they had shown something rare: the will to try, even when failing. The motion needed 104 votes to pass. The room held its breath. Voting began with the oldest members. The crystal being Orlan voted yes without hesitation. The Lumari followed. Then the Gelth, the Umari, the Klin. But the Ketheri block voted no as expected. The Varel conquered stood silent, arms crossed, faces hard. One by one, votes came in. Some yes, some no. Many abstained. When the Cathari ambassador Zorak cast the final expected vote, no, the tally stood at 103 yes, 103 no. A tie by ancient law, a tie meant the Archon would decide. The Archon was not a person. It was an artificial mind older than any living species, created by the ancients to oversee fairness in the council. It had not spoken in over 3,000 years. It simply counted votes, maintained records, and watched. No one expected it to do more. The platform grew still. Even the storms below seemed to pause. Then, from the center of the dais, light gathered. Not bright, not loud, just a soft glow that shaped itself into a sphere. A voice came not in words, but in feeling, translated instantly into every mind present. It said only, "They remind us what it means to hope." No vote was cast. No judgment given, just that sentence echoing through every species, every ship, every world linked to the relay. And in that moment, something shifted. The Archon had not chosen Earth. It had reminded the galaxy why choice mattered. Earth was granted full membership. Cheers erupted, not just from humans, but from dozens of species. The Mycelians shimmered with joy. Lyra of the Tarni wept light tears. Even a few Cathari looked away, thoughtful, uncertain. But the real change happened after. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under rigid rules for generations began to question them. Why must progress be perfect? Why must peace mean silence? On a dozen worlds, young beings gathered in public squares, sharing stories of their own flaws and dreams. The Varel Concord's message of fear lost its power. Hope, it turned out, was contagious. On Earth, people did not celebrate with parades or fireworks. They gathered in parks and homes and quiet places. They held hands. They listened. They remembered how close they had come to being forgotten. And they promised, not to the council but to each other, to keep trying. Luke returned to his observatory in New Mexico. He sat under the stars, not as a man who had saved Earth, but as one who finally understood his place in something much larger. Maya joined him a week later, bringing tea and a new data chip. "The relay's still open," she said. "They're sending us star maps. Not for conquest, for friendship." Zoe and Derek worked with AI minds from 3 other species to build a new ethics framework, one that valued growth over perfection. Elise became the first human archivist of the Galactic Council, helping other young species understand their own treaties. Nina traveled to Mycelian space to learn their language of light and scent. Chris stayed on Earth, helping rebuild trust between nations, now with a shared purpose beyond borders. But the panic the title spoke of was not over. It had just changed shape. The universe was no longer afraid of Earth. It was afraid of itself. For so long, the Council had believed peace meant control, order, silence. Earth had shown them that peace could also mean mess, noise, and heart. And that scared some more than war ever had. Rebellions did not break out with weapons. They began with questions. Why do we follow rules that crush spirit? Can a species be worthy even if it stumbles? What if the ancients wanted us not to be perfect but to be alive? The Archon's words spread like seeds. On dusty mining colonies, in ocean cities beneath alien seas, in orbital stations older than human history, beings began to speak up. Not to overthrow, but to ask, what if we tried something new? Earth did not become a galactic power overnight. It had no great fleet, no secret weapon. Its only power was its story. And stories, as it turned out, could move stars. Back in Geneva, the relay ring stayed open, now a permanent doorway. Children waved at alien visitors. Farmers shared seeds with plant-based envoys. Musicians played with beings who made sound from magnetic fields. It was awkward. It was beautiful. It was real. One evening, as the sun set over the hills of New Mexico, Luke looked up and saw a new star in the sky. It wasn't a star. It was a ship, small, peaceful, coming to learn. He smiled. Humanity had not just joined the galaxy. They had reminded it how to feel, And in that feeling, the universe found not panic but possibility.